Cat Gang should be showing up, should be joining us here shortly. I am, of course, the magical Mr. Mephisto. This is episode 68 of AOS RantCast. Look at me stammering over my own pitch. That's how planned I am. Okay. This is, of course, Mephisto's Merry Month of Death. This is the second week. We will be featuring Flesheater Courts. I am joined tonight by a very special guest. She is an extended member of the Pants Mafia. She has a wall of death trophy, or she has a wall of trophies from sports to hobby. And recently, I believe it was last year, Dragonfall, you picked up your best death, and over 100 tournament games played with Flesheater Courts between both books. Tanya, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Awesome. So I actually wanted you. I part of the reason I really wanted you on the show was one, like the local connection. I really like to feature my friends, but also, you played Flesheater Courts through both books. You weren't just like the bandwagon that everyone kind of gets heat for. You're not an AOS 2 baby.
Right.
Like you were ride or die with Flesheater Courts there for a while. So
Yeah. Oh, it's been a long, fun road. I was kind of the first army I think I was doing when points dropped. Prior to that, I was goofing around with some of my old Dark Elf stuff, but when points dropped, it's pretty much Flesheater Courts all the way.
Right. So that what I call the Dark Ages before points existed. So you actually have a established. I mean, you played Warhammer Fantasy Battle. You want to take me through how you kind of got into Warhammer, when you got into Warhammer, and kind of what got you into Warhammer?
Yeah. So I started playing Warhammer. I was painting a little bit before that, but I started playing in about 7th edition fantasy with Dark Elves. Always a big fan of the Witch Elves and Dark Elves, and those who have even just seen my Twitter handles and things have probably figured out that Dark Elves are a big thing for me.
Your Twitter handle is of course Dark Elf Sorceress. If people want to follow you and kind of see some of your progress with your hobby, because I know you do a great deal of hobby as well.
I do, and I'm kind of all over the map sometimes, but but yeah, Dark Elves was where I started at. I played those pretty much exclusively. I did dabble in some vampire count stuff because bats are awesome, and that's where bats live. It's in the vampire counts book. But I couldn't really make an army that I wanted using like just bats because they weren't core or something similar to Battle Line now. So I had like some skeletons and things like that along the way. I loved the Vargolf model when it came out way back then. I have 3 metal ones sitting on my shelf that frequent my Flesheater Courts armies. And so when end times happened, it was kind of weird and crazy. I still mostly played Dark Elves all the way up through that. Sigmar came out, and I wasn't that interested at first. It was a big change from Warhammer Fantasy. But the majority of the fantasy players that I knew, that I hung out with, that we went to events with, were kind of switching over to it. So I figured I'd give it a shot. Pre-points, it was a crazy ride. I just kind of tried to throw in the Dark Elf stuff I was playing prior to Age of Sigmar, and it was a horrible mess because those things didn't have any synergies. But eventually they got there. Anyway, so when points dropped, Flesheater Courts was a great option. It allowed me to play bad armies, although it didn't allow me to fold in the bat swarms and
flayers are bat-like.
Oh, bad, but yeah, and you'll notice, or anyone who's seen my stuff, played me, flayers are really what flayers and terrorgeists are kind of what my lists consist of. So bats are cool.
Bats are cool. That's actually really metal. I think it's interesting because so like I'm the other army I was about to collect, it was like Dark Elves, and then my friend back in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, this was like Vampire Counts had just kind of come out, and I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna, the other battle tome I essentially owned was Dark Elves, and so I think there's got to be a commonality between Death players and like liking the like edgy like dark elves and stuff like that, because you have some similar like some overlapping iconography. There's a very like vampiric quality, I think, to dark elves themselves, and let alone witch elves who are actually like blood crazed and stuff. So I don't think that's a coincidence that you also like dark elves and stuff like that. This might be our first tangent of the night. So if you're playing the RantCast drinking game that you're not supposed to play, because it might kill you. Like
I can
if dark elves
I can take you on even further tangent.
yeah, if Malarian elves come out, are you going to be a buyer? Like, do you think you would buy into Malarian elves, or
gotta see what it'll entail. I mean, dark elves. What I ran a lot of was wood elves, so we already have that with Daughters of Cain, and I have that on the shelf with things that I need to work on. So you'll see those from me eventually again. They actually making some surprise appearances in my cities, the Sigmar list, because they're way better than executioners. So they've been hanging out in my living city list right now.
Right on. Right on. Right. Yeah, so chat gang here just sounding off real quick. Furious Bumblegoo says, bring on Malarian. Vanilla Sauce says, Tanya confirmed she is Batwoman. Razor Tree says, started with Dark Elves. I approve. And Terrorgeist is, of course, a big bat. Yes, Kicker. Terrorgeist is probably the biggest of bats. Razor Tree announcing that the kids are in bed. He's off tomorrow. He has rum. Let's get some FEC. I am in, and cheers to you, my friend.
I approve.
So chat gang already popping off. Elf Joe, the aptly named Elf Joe, says there can never be enough elves.
I approve of that statement as well.
Yeah, as basic materials. That's me. Leave the bats alone. Like, actually, I actually like bats IRL too. Like, Molly can't stand them, but we go to the Milwaukee County Zoo, or we used to rather frequently. I hang out in the bat room for like a long time, like a disturbing amount of time. I'm just like fruit bats especially. Like, they're adorable, and they just like they have these weird licky tongues. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I went. I was at the Omaha Zoo, and they have the one exhibit where the bats are pretty much free to fly around. I think it's like the South American exhibit or something like that. They're just literally free to fly around all over the area that you're walking through. It's pretty awesome.
That's metal. Yeah.
The bats.
Yeah. So okay, back a little bit back on the topic here. So you get into Flesheater Courts. It's kind of like, all she wrote for a few years.
Yeah.
And you said you like gravitate towards the flayers. Brendan actually said your list right before the second book drop was actually a really killer list. You care to? Do you know what he might have been referring to? Like what that?
I know exactly. I know exactly what it is, and I pulled it up because it was pretty awesome. And then the new book dropped, and I couldn't summon in 1,000 more points anymore. So
sort of like this.
Right,
go ahead. Yeah.
Right by the end of that new book, right by the end of that old book, I found a list that I was really enjoying. It did have ghouls in it, which aren't bats, but you kind of stuck with them sometimes. But it allowed me to summon in 1,000 extra points, roughly. I don't remember the exact points right now. But it was King. I don't even know if I can share a screen or anything like that. But
you can. There's a screen share button right down there in the middle. You've got your microphone, and in between your microphone or your camera, share your screen.
Figure out how to use this fancy thing here.
One of the many advantages of Discord. Okay. Boom, there it is.
All the Zoom calls have taught me how to use technology better, I guess.
There you go.
I'm gonna do half screen, better half screen on my screen. So it was a King on Terrorgeist, right? And we didn't have access to a bunch of things. All the new spells and all that stuff. So you're pretty limited. Aether Quartz was a must-have for all my lists. I know it wasn't everybody's favorite at that time for Flesheater Quartz. I think a lot of people gravitated towards like Griff Feather Charm and stuff. But yeah, King on Terrorgeist, a couple of Ghoul Kings on foot, a couple of Vargolfs, the minimum battle line 3-time man ghouls to make it legal, a 3 and a 6-man Flayer, and then this Royal Family Battalion, which I don't really think anybody was goofing around with at the time. And that Royal Family Battalion, because I want to make sure I get it right. Pull my old book here. was either a king on Terrorgeist or on Zombie Dragon, and then 2 to 6 Ghoul Kings, right?
Right.
So with that battalion in the older book, and the makeup is the same in the current book, but the rules are different. So whenever you called forth what was it? For the manor, each time a courtier uses an army ability to call forth an additional Flesheater Courts models, add 1 additional model to the eligible unit if the courtier is within 10 of a royal family model when the ability is used.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I don't even think I used that part of it that much.
Probably just to get your drops down,
but,
and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but Summon Sycophant was the part that we used. So if you had fewer than 6 Ghoul Kings, you could use that ability instead of any other abilities that they're normally able to use. If they do so, set up a new important Ghoul King within 3 inches of the edge of the battlefield, more than 9 away from the models. So I would bring in, you bring in new Ghoul Kings. So it allowed me to bring in 2 Ghoul Kings for the cost of 1, like for the summoning command point option of 1. You could only do it 1 time. But you bring in 2 Ghoul Kings.
Are you still there? Oh my. So yeah, you bring in the 2 Ghoul Kings, and then like, oh my gosh, we lost her. I'm sure she'll be back. There we go. Yeah, there was that window essentially, Vanilla Sauce, of AOS 2 where Flesheater Courts hadn't come out yet. Flesheater Courts hadn't come out yet, and you had this sort of like in between window, which many of you may know, but some people may not. You had this sort of in between window of like the old book. They had just gotten rid of reinforcement points, and so like you just like a lot of their summoning that had essentially relied on reinforcement points. Like there was some low key heat in Flesheater Courts because all that summoning that had like a throttle mechanism on it was gone. And the only real throttle to it was essentially, command abilities and stuff like that, which they had an all right time. Let's see when she hops back in here. They had a pretty decent time being able to, farm some CPs. You didn't have the limit to, how many extra you could buy and stuff like that. So you could actually like sort of spam off a lot of these summons, and like, yeah, some of your war scrolls were weak, but when you're playing with a 3,000 point army versus a 2,000 point army, and you play a board control sort of zoning style game, you can really like kind of bully people just with just the sheer volume of stuff. I was kind of sorry, waiting for you to kind of hop back in here.
Yeah,
had to play for time.
Working? Yeah. My mic working? No.
Yep, you're good.
Anybody?
You're good. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Cool.
All right, awesome.
It was telling me that it wasn't working. So, all right. 2 extra Ghoul Kings, 2 extra units of 10 ghouls, in addition to the other 2 Ghoul Kings units of 10 ghouls, in addition to the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist 3 flayers, and you're running around with 2 extra casters, 2 extra heroes that are able to give your your save abilities and stuff like that around.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy, and it was working pretty well.
It's almost.
The new book dropped.
Go ahead.
It's great.
Hey, Owen, the new book dropped. It's almost like the Napoleonic version of Flesheater Courts, because the new Flesheater Courts is not that anymore. I'd still say there's a small amount of a quantity, like has a quality of its own. There's a little bit of that, but with that list you're talking about, it very much was the quantity was the quality, because there wasn't a lot of like other quality in the list. You were just sort of being rather oppressive, and exactly, Vanilla Sauce. Ben had I always forget if it's Nova or if it was Nova or LVO. I think it was Nova. He took essentially like a big summoning. He was heavy on flayers, as I recall, but he took a list like that and ended up winning. Winning it all with it. So and then the new book drops was where I kind of cut you off.
Yeah, so the new book dropped. I was just kind of getting to the point where I was getting really comfortable, and I'd argue maybe even good with the list that I was just describing. New book drops. Royal Family doesn't work the same way, which takes out, 4 additional summons. So kind of switch gears. The funny thing was I was able to take the base list and just swap it with the new book points wise. Nothing changed there, but obviously the mechanics of how it all put together changed. And good things, you get mount traits, you get access to the delusions and access to the grand courts and stuff like that. But negative, lost a bunch of something.
So you, I mean, the strategy just completely broke down. So you kind of had this like no man, this sort of like weird sort of like no fly zone or like this middle period where I'd imagine you were trying to make the old list work, or did you just immediately switch off of it, or like how did that work?
I tried in the initial moment to make the old list work. I think I got kind of lucky the weekend I tried it out. It was a 3-round event at Grognard. I think I played Brendan and Zach. I think I beat both of them, which was impressive for me. And then lost my third game to some super fun eels from Josh, my buddy Josh.
Right.
So it was. So I kind of felt good about it after that. Like, oh, okay, this might work. And then I think I played it a few more times and realized, nah, it's just not
this. Yeah, it's not in the correct.
To do.
Yeah, yeah. So Vanilla Sauce kind of jumping the gun a little bit here, but what's your new book favorite delusion or Grand Court?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably still Bristlegore's Court. Like, I mean, it's just good. Terrorgeists are awesome. It's so great. It's even great for all those other little heroes too. Like Ghoul Kings coming in with their 6 attacks, and then striking extra when they roll 6s. I mean, it was just fun. I've had Ghoul Kings do way more. Just Ghoul Kings on foot, by the way. Do way more than they should reasonably be able to do with their 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1.
Yeah.
I've killed. What did I? I killed a zombie. I killed a Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon the one time, and I was ecstatic.
With your foot, with your little foot Ghoul King.
Yeah. It was just that moment, that little moral victory at the end there. Everything else died, and my Ghoul King, he did it. He killed the Zombie Dragon. I still lost, but it was fun.
Yeah, I see. I think this actually leads to one of the takes. So before you had this sort of quantity has a quality all its own type list, that was like the old, and I think that was the old reality for Flesheater courts in general. The new reality for Flesheater courts is like they suddenly find themselves, and I think there's an interesting little sort of like point counterpoint or balance counterbalance amid all the like the death factions right now. I think we have this like really neat equilibrium. Flesheater courts actually ended up becoming our monster mash army. So like you're running usually 2 monster trucks with wings, or gigantic bats, kind of as like a core of the list, and then from there it's like, okay, now what else? And I think that's a really cool dichotomy, because Nighthaunt and Legion of Nagash actually kind of step a little bit on each other's foots, because they're both like very horde heavy death, and then obviously Ossiarch Bone Reapers are like our elite death. So I think there's like an interesting, like within those, ignoring the overlap between sort of Nighthaunt and Legions of Nagash, which has its own sort of dissonance we'll talk about in the later episode. Ignoring the fact that those two like kind of step on each other's toes, you have then like Horde Undead. If you want to play Horde Undead, you go this direction. If you want to rock the Monster Mash, you go this direction. And if you want to be like elite kind of grinders, you go this direction. And I think that makes like a nice little like, if you're a death player, you have this like really awesome decision to make between like how you want to play, and monster trucks are a lot of fun. So I think there's no shame in loving Gristlegore. So I mean, because you had this OG status, I feel like you maybe dodged a little bit of that Gristlegore hate early on, or how did you process that when that was happening? Because I think that was a very a big part of the reality for a lot of people is, first off, tons of people are still playing Flesheater courts that kind of jumped on that bandwagon, quote unquote, right? One of the bandwagons you were for all intents and purposes driving. But the thing about bandwagon fans is if they stay, they're just fans, and so maybe we need to not be harsh towards like so-called bandwagoners, because again, they're just fans usually. And a lot of people still playing Flesheater Courts, though I think I've seen people migrate away from Gristlegore. How was it in those sort of early days of Gristlegore for you? Like, what was your experience with that and some of the community?
I think most people were still pretty negative towards it. In general, I didn't really care. I mean, it was what I was playing before. It just made it better. So, yeah, I was going to play it anyway. I dabbled with like Blisterkin. I had a lot of people argue that Feast Day was better, and maybe they're right, for different reasons. But I mean, I just couldn't. I don't know. You just can't knock how good Gristlegore is. And I know why people hate it. I mean, it's.
Well, it's not. It's
yeah.
If people are hating it now, like how very 2018 of you, or I have no idea. I've completely lost sense of all time. They fixed it the exact way they needed to fix it, which is like when you charge, then you do the thing, right? Like that fixes it. That means that there is counterplay, and that's all there needed to be. I'd actually posit they went a touch too far, overcorrecting some other stuff in that book, but I digress. Well, no, I don't digress. This is the Flesheater Courts episode. The fact that you can't buy and stack command points anymore already nerfed that army. The fact that you can't start the game with +2, you spend 100 points on command points, you have a battalion, and Aether Quartz Brooch is like gone forever. Like the fact that you can't do that anymore, like already brought the army like down a peg. And then they nerfed Gristlegore, and that brought it down yet another peg. The one was like, so like you have that sort of like targeted nerf, and then they got essentially a meta nerf, and then they adjusted points. And I mean, Archregent's super it's a really great model. Like you should pretty much every list runs one, and a lot of people are trying to get that second one in now. And but I mean, if that thing stayed at its like points cost, you wouldn't have heard me complain. It's fine. I mean, idiot foot heroes, especially since you don't have like death saves or hitting redundant death saves, hit death a lot harder than anybody else for the most part. And amongst death, Flesheater Courts got hit the hardest. So you have this other nerf on top of it, and so you have this army that was everyone's most hated army for a large. I don't think we hate Slaanesh as much as we did, and I mean as a community. I personally, you've heard my stories. 50-50 all-time record. Get at me. You can't take it away from me. I've beat I went even with them with UP armies like Beasts of Chaos and over-nerfed LON. Anyway, I digress on that. No, I think that like they're in line now, bordering on like kind of like sliding down the power tier as like newer armies come out and take advantage of like the sort of newer just sort of landscape of the meta. I mean, shooting is good against Terrorgeists, right? Like shooting's good. So they have natural predators now, which is something they didn't have in like the combat height. So what I'm saying, this is me tripling down. If you still have a problem with Flesheater Courts, you need to look at yourself. The army has been more than fixed, and there is more than enough answers in the game right now. So like, but if you didn't expect me to honk Flesheater Courts, you came to the wrong episode tonight, everybody. Love this FEC hype. Yeah. I'm just kind of catching up with chat here. If you want to kind of fire off there.
Sure. I mean, the book, in my opinion, is still strong. It's still solid. Are you going to see it winning tournaments? Probably not. I mean, the current kind of meta like information we're seeing out there right now from those countries fortunate enough to be able to play tournaments is suggesting that there's some new favorites in town. I have seen Flesheater Courts on there a couple times. They've shown up in the top 5, so that's still refreshing. I think most of that's been Blisterkin, which is kind of the current favorite, I'd say. I'm not entirely sure why that switch. I think it started kind of as a response to Gristlegore being so hated, but
well, I mean,
I'm sure there's plenty of other reasons now.
No, that's
the movement on Blisterkin is phenomenal.
Yeah. No, that's 100% true. I mean, we have more objectives now than ever. Your summoning is super potent. Like yeah, like battle line, you're not technically battle line summoning on your stuff anymore, and that sucks. But the blister skin movement, I mean my take on Gristlegore is like it is very good, but there are like you can play in a manner to where you don't need it. It's nice to have it, but like it just like I don't want to call it a win more because it morphs your strategy, but like I don't know. It's where I think Flesheater Court sits in the meta is I wouldn't be surprised if it wins like a mid-sized tournament, or if the player just runs absolutely hot, takes like a 100-person event. Like if they run absolutely hot, you look at the matchups and you see okay, like they dodged like this one killer list that's out there, and then they took it 5-0, 5-0 or 4-1 with like strong tiebreakers. Like I would not be surprised. Because Flesheater Courts to me is the puncher's chance army. Flesheater Courts is the ultimate play to your outs army within death. It is the one that sometimes a Terrorgeist can just pop off for 30 mortal wounds, and you might have the greatest strategy in the world, but sometimes just a fly 16 plus if it gets its buff off things that's going to punch you for 30 mortals just... Well, 30 damage, we'll say. Just like out of nowhere, can just change a game. You know, like that's a Mega Gargant almost dead. You know, just take it, right? Like I think so. This is an army that if you play it clever, you get in your reps because you know I'm sort of an army loyalist. I believe in playing an army for a year or you know whatever that an extended period of time. Playing it through its downswing, you got to play it when you need to learn to play off the back foot. It's okay to play when you're playing Gristlegore and not you in general. When the community was playing Gristlegore at the height of its power, they didn't have an opportunity to learn their counter plays and the counters to the counterplay. It was just push dragons forward, win. You know, like I'm oversimplifying, but like it's hard to learn extra strategies beyond that. Now it's like okay, now you got to think your way through it. You got to think through like your deployments a lot more. You got to think through a proper use of your summoning. Like where do I want to put these bodies? What do I want to summon? Like you have to think about that a little bit more than you had to before. Where before it was just like okay, I want the bodies, you know, just to be there and score. And now you have to actually think about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So Flesheater Courts for me is like Ossiarch Bone Reaper's got the data to suggest it's the better army right now, but against this meta, Ossiarch Bone Reapers takes harder losses than Flesheater Courts. Because Flesheater Courts has that puncher's chance, where Ossiarch Bone Reapers, if your hard counter shows up, there's very little you can do short of just playing out of your mind or having out of your mind dice. Equal skill, talking equal skill to equal skill in terms of players. If you're equal skill to somebody with Ossiarch Bone Reapers and they're running your hard counter, that is a long uphill battle. Flesheater Courts equal skill, they're bringing your counter, you still got that puncher's chance. You can still just bring the KO punch. I feel like I cut off one of your thoughts in there. If you
I mean, right now, you know, Shooter Courts is still, again, it's still strong. We suffer horribly in the same area that a lot of armies suffer, that we don't have great answers to shooting, especially things like raptors, those things that can shoot you from across the board and do some heinous damage, and even just a lot of, you know, the millions of small shots just doing enough wounds. You know, one of my weaknesses is waiting a little too long to do certain things with some of my Terrorgeists, and you know, you find those death by 1,000 cuts type moments particularly upsetting after you realize you waited too long.
right,
that's just me at least.
Right, knowing when to apply the pressure with when to like go for the uppercut is something that is just you got to pick it up with time, knowing your army and being comfortable in the matchup, right?
Yeah.
Got a question here from Paul from the Mortal Realms podcast. He says, "Will you ever go back to your Dark Elves, or not until Malarian, or not ever?" Somebody missed the beginning of the show, but would you care to catch him up?
Yeah. Hey, Paul. So I've always gonna love my Dark Elves. I'm always gonna be working on my Dark Elves here and there. Currently been playing a Cities of Sigmar army that is essentially Darkling Covens that I've added right now. I've added in 30 witch elves and a hag queens right now. Yeah, hag queen. This is a nice 400 points of allies there. Always kind of working on like Daughters of Cain stuff in the background. Eventually, I'll have those guys up and running because I do have a deep love for my witch elves as well. But Flesheater courts are always just a nice, solid option for me, and they were a great, great place to start with. Pointed Age of Sigmar.
Well, this is this actually leads me to a good point I think about Flesheater courts. While we're just kind of talking about everything Flesheater courts, and Bumblegoose has something in chat here I want to address as well. This is a great army for the range of people in the hobby. If you're just getting into Age of Sigmar, I refer to Flesheater courts as sort of like a blank canvas army. I'm not a big fan of the models. I've kind of mentioned it before, but I mean they're pretty decently easy to paint and stuff like that. They have some bone, they have some flesh, they have some leather, quote unquote. They've got some texture. They take to contour paints pretty decently well. But like where they really shine. So like yeah, if you're like intimidated by hobby, this isn't some intricate like crazy thing that you're just going to struggle with for the most part of your base troops. And then you got those centerpieces. You've got some classical centerpieces to grind out your skills on with the Terrorgeist and if you go zombie dragon. So you have like that sort of like beginner sort of friendly sort of army in terms of like the hobby. It's not
can be
right. I'm getting to the other side of that coin in a second. The other. Well, I guess what do you mean by it can be? I'll let you. You're the guest. What do you mean?
So the first Terrorgeist took me forever to paint. I got that. I'm pretty sure I got that back still in Fantasy. I think we just got those near the end of Fantasy there. Building it was a challenge. I think by the time I got to the third one that I built, I kind of mastered it now. Those first two were a little difficult. And then painting it, a lot of people paint them in sub-assemblies, the Terrorgeist specifically, and the zombie dragons, just because it's a challenge. I mean, you've painted
super spindly,
part of the Bone Reaper stuff, yeah. So you're at least familiar with the same kind of concept, like, oh look, here's all the guts inside.
As if I don't own several zombie dragons.
Well, that too.
I think I own 4 zombie dragons. So
I mean, on the one hand, the army can be really easy to paint up because you can really simplify a theme. But on the other hand, depending on your preferences or your paint style or stuff like that, it can be a challenge.
Right, and see that's actually, I think that's a good thing. That sort of like you're essentially on a staircase of skill when you're painting this stuff. You don't typically have tons and tons of models because you do have sort of like 2 centerpieces or 1 big centerpiece. An arch region takes up a good chunk of your points. By the time you're like at two arch regions, the heroes for your battalions, because this army, pick a battalion. There's 3 of them that I would recommend, and I see the value in all 3 of them. Pick one of them because you can't buy command points anymore, so just pick one and tailor your list towards that. The Dead Watch, Ghoul Patrol, and I actually do think Royal Family or whatever, or what is it called? The one you were just talking about.
The Royal.
Where it's.
I think most people are sticking more towards like Royal Mordants or.
That might be Royal Mordants. Not
Royal Mordants has got that nice spread. The Royal Family is just kind of the Terrorgeist, Zombie Dragon, and
Royal Mordants. I think might have been the one I was thinking of. Yeah, but like pick one of those 3. And then build a list around it for the most part. Like, you want to do it, but again, you have that like sort of curve up the way through. You're going to be buying a battalion because you need to. So you're not taking tons and tons of models. You probably have a 40 block of ghouls, maybe. You then have your points under. It really depends on what you're building. If you're running a Flare heavy list, it's not a ton of models at all. Your summon board is like the bulk of where your model's at. So it's a very approachable army. But the flip side of that coin is, because it is kind of a blank canvas, this army is going to look as good as the effort you put into it. It is because the fluff is basically the best in the whole game. If I'm going to put on my Death Homer hat for a minute here. Hang on, let me find it. All right. It's like it's it has the best fluff. Like this whole like grand illusion, ha ha ha, Bretonians. Like we could meme a little bit if we want to, but like I love that they're so caught up. They are ghouls, you know, like the sort of like pseudo vampire ghoul, you know, traditional lore that people would be familiar with, that are completely caught up in this delusion. They think they are nobility, like they think they're at a grand ball. And it reads throughout the whole lore as you read through their book. They have photographs where like they're sitting there and like one of like the little spindly ghouls are holding up like a mirror, and like the reflection in it is just this like royal ball. And it's the way that like it can be actually a little confusing to read sometimes, because like they talk about things as knights and serfs and stuff, and you're like, wait a second, what are knights and serfs? And you have to like go back and like, oh yeah, like they're talking about like you know, they're talking about their flayers, and they're talking about their ghouls. And what ends up happening is this that blank slate ties back in that really awesome fluff, that really awesome lore. They're not directly like beholden to Nagash. Like they don't like he essentially imposes his will over all of the stuff. They have their own will for the most part. They just party with him because their delusions are like just happen to align with this guy. So like they even have like that if you're looking for the death faction that isn't beholden to Nagash, I don't know why that would be a selling point for you, because he's the coolest, but like they have that too, and that blank slate of delusion, that sort of blank canvas of delusion, means you can paint like half and half Stormcast. They think they're Stormcast, and the other half is ghouls, the way that our G-Dead here has done. You can do the Bretonian thing, go all in and buying a bunch of your old Bretonian models, or if you already have them laying around, or trade for them, do the half and half Bretonian, or do all Bretonian, but like just make it weird and kind of creepy. I've seen some armies that are like Dia de los Muertos, you know, where they got the like really sort of like really intricately painted, like sort of very colorful, like sort of faces with the, and I've seen some armies like that. Like there's a lot of armies are, you know, it's a hobby game. You can convert any army, but it's like, for me, it's almost like Flesheater courts beg to be converted because of that like narrative of this grand these delusional sort of pseudo undead vampire monstrosities.
Yeah, I've seen some fun ones come around. Mostly, you know, kind of Empire Bretonian flair to them, using like griffins for the Terrorgeist or zombie dragons. You know, just some kit bashing with some of the Empire or Bretonian bits, or even just going all in and using some of those Empire Bretonian models. You know, for ghouls and whatnot. Pretty cool.
Yeah. So we kind of, I really wanted to touch on that vanilla sauce. Do you use the realm artifacts, and do you skip them? We'll get to that in a second. I've got our actually artifacts on my little bullet points here, as we kind of get into like the actual running of like what do we do now, and what do we think of them going forward. I think is where we're ultimately moving.
Yeah.
Best death has 8 legs. Always be on brand, Paul. Always be on brand. Love you, buddy. Yeah, and then G-Dead spending 1,000 RDP to remind everyone that Shaq ain't none to fuck with. I love doing conversions and such with my FEC. I mean, Kicker, by the way, was sort of like getting it, like kind of did that gradual like get into the descent into madness, if you will, the descent into delusion, and like picked up like I think it was like the little war band of the ghouls, and like painted them up, and then you know, we got to see like that sort of gradual hobby journey of someone getting into Flesheater courts. I mean, this army is awesome. I don't think it gets enough credit for how cool it is personally. I don't like it's kind of on the lowest tier for me to collect, but every now and then I just kind of sit back and I'm just admiring. I'm like, why? Like I want to drive monster trucks, and the answer is actually the hobby side of it. It's I want to be at like in that sort of like really higher echelons of hobby when I tackle Flesheater courts, because I have ideas that I am not up to for my theme, and as soon as I must be this tall to ride hobby, and then I'll jump in on you'll start seeing me painting some Flesheater courts. If you redo Dark Elves, would they be Flesheater courts? Come on, Ball.
Yeah, I definitely redo my Dark Elves. You'll just continue to see my 6th, 7th edition Dark Elf models showing up on the table. So people don't even recognize them. They're like, what is that? Those are Blackguard before this fancy plastic kit that came out.
Yeah. So yeah, Flesheater courts. I think I've adequately hyped them. You've adequately hyped them. There's the propaganda. I think this army's awesome. As far as like death go, I think they're contenders, and they have the same struggles that literally every death army has right now. So like if you're already in on death, get used to figuring out how to play around shooting. Like that's just if you're committing to the hype train for the best Grand Alliance in Age of Sigmar, which is death. You just need to start learning to play to your outs and seek out people who play like KO well, people who play Seraphon well, like any of those. Seek out Tzeentch. Like I was headhunting Tzeentch players right as I collected like Ossiarch Bone Reapers. I'm like, I want to play every Tzeentch player. So like seek out those matchups. I mean, get comfortable with it. I shared a meme when like KO was coming back and everyone was like worried about it. I'm like, I was born like many of you merely adopted the shooting meta. I was born into this because I got right in when Skyfires and Tzeentch and original Clown Car were the big picks, and I'm like, whatever. I played Nagash into that stuff. I'm not afraid anymore. So go out and be not afraid, because remember, everything dies and then undies when you're playing the Death faction. So death is not the sort of end game. It is just a step in the beautiful grand schemes and machinations of Nagash. So shifting over to kind of revisiting a little bit of a question from earlier on, which is, you see, Gristlegore, you're very firmly Gristlegore. I actually, I like Blisterkin. I actually like Grand Illusion Feast Day personally. I really like that command ability, or that command point, especially since you don't have your Aether Quartz brooches anymore and you can't stack command points.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's definitely a great one. You look back through that list and, I spent the time the last couple of days, since it's been a while since I've really poured through any of this stuff, and there really is only one great choice in there, and it is Feast Day. I goofed around early on with Crusading Army because I liked it before this book, as a, I don't know if it was Legion's trait or what it was considered in the allegiance that was in the older GHBs. But it takes a big back seat to Feast Day.
Yeah. I'm sorry, just refreshing my memory on something here. So one of the I think it is. I think Gristlegore is still viable. I understand the blister skin, because I mean, this is, if I could put it in, summarize it. Gristlegore plays the army, like plays against your opponent's army. Blisterskin plays against the objectives, and Feast Day plays your strategy. Plays to your strategy. And so I think that now there's some overlap in when these are good and bad respectively, but that's kind of how I sort them out. I think always it is an objective game, so whatever is going to help you play the objectives the best is usually going to be not necessarily like the best in a like knockdown, drag out, straight up fist fight, right? Like, but in terms of giving yourself the edge in an event where it's multiple days, looking at it from a tournament perspective, multiple days, usually like some semblance of random or not knowing the battle plans, like that is where I think you really, I think people gravitate a lot towards like the blister skin. But I personally like to have my strategy and just execute regardless. Like having a win stroke or a winning move, and just go, this is how I'm going to beat you. Going into games like that and just going, and that's how I play. What's the downside of that? I can tunnel vision on that strategy, or if something goes wrong, you adapt to my strategy, or the dice don't, blah blah blah. I need to have a second or third strategy that might not be as good or ideal. But if you're always just focused on the objectives and it's just noise on that other side of the battlefield, it almost doesn't even matter. You can really put yourself in an advantageous position to win some games. That's what I think the old Flesheater courts did, and so players coming over from Flesheater courts from that sort of first book have that edge. I guess that sums up the sort of Grand Alliance and or Delusion, not Grand Alliance, Grand Illusion discussion. I mean, those are the three you're looking for. It's one of those three. I think speed kills, so that's a lot of fun. But murdering stuff also wins games. Your opponent can't win if all their stuff is dead, so Gristle Gore is a lot of fun. Feast Day murders you too because you get free command points, and your command points are just used to double tap activations essentially. So,
sure.
Do you want to lead the discussion sort of into like kind of more through this? I'm not interested in like reading the whole Battle Tome to people. The Battle Tome reviews have been out forever. This is more of a retrospective, right. And then where are we now? Like where are they now? It's VH1.
Yeah, I mean, the new book really opened a lot of possibilities, but also kind of, just like everything, leaves you with a few really shining examples, and unfortunately everything else kind of falls by the wayside. We talked a little bit about the delusions, and, Crusading Army was where I kind of hung out in the world before this book, just for extra movement. I mean, it was phenomenal in a game where, we all know objectives rule it, and if you can move around to get to them or prevent your opponent from getting to them, more power to you. So that was always kind of fun. The Blisterkin kind of has that built in with its inherent abilities, so you don't really even need to go that route unless you want to be a little bit more particular in your artifacts and other choices that you might be limited to otherwise. Being able to access mount traits was huge. Everybody kind of sticks with the favorite. Was it Ferocious? Oh man.
Ferocious Bite, right?
Yeah, the Gruesome Bite, I think is what it's called.
Gruesome Bite.
Pull it up here. Yeah, Gruesome Bite. We all know what it is. It's the one where you reroll all your failed, basically your failed maw attacks.
Your crit fishing.
But everybody wants you to roll sixes on.
Yeah, you're essentially crit fishing.
Yeah, and I don't play the zombie dragons. I think Razor Clawed is the one that people
for the rend
hang out with there.
It's
rend because it's pretty helpful.
Yeah, or the fly high ability actually. So we're entering the era because shooting has done weird stuff to the meta. We're starting to see these null deployment armies come through. And Flesheater Courts has a null deployment strategy, which null deployment, since it's, I think most people are familiar with it, but some folks may not be, or this might be your first time watching a podcast about Age of Sigmar. Null deployment means you start the game with nothing on the table. So like against those shooting opponents that want to that can just kind of reach out and touch you. You talked about like Raptors early. KO boats, if you don't have the chaff line to perfectly sort of screen them from their shooting range, they have someplace they can come down and just pop your priority targets. With a sort of null deployment strategy. Now there is a risk to it. If your opponent has enough bodies to screen out the table, you won't get onto the table. And even if they don't have enough bodies, a clever opponent's going to try to put you in a bad position. But it's just a tool in the toolbox. This is something I learned with Beasts of Chaos, is being able to just put stuff off the table and then make your opponent have to screen a backside objective when you're like, I was coming on over here anyway. I mean, that KG play, null deployment is, again, like, so the two dragons that both fly high and then like a ghoul patrol, you don't start with anything on that. You're just like, okay, Like, so there are, so that's the sort of exception I'd list is that mount trait is that, I think it's called fly high. Everyone knows what I mean, colloquial speaking,
Yeah.
talking about it.
Yeah, I think Death from the Skies is what I'm seeing
Death
here.
from,
But
yeah,
we all get the same idea.
Yeah, Death from the Skies. Yeah, I use shorthand to remember what it does a lot of the time, and then I forget if that was the real name or the shorthand I was using.
It's all good.
So that one, yeah, continue. You talking about like sort of the traits and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of liked, and for a little while I was playing with Horribly Resilient because, again, I was playing with a lot of things that were keeping Terrorgeist alive because it was just such an annoyance for my opponents when they're just like, why won't it die? Well, you're healing wounds. It's fantastic. It doesn't get you nearly as far as Gruesome Bite does, but it was a good backup.
The best offense, the best defense is a great offense, right? Like, I mean, we got to address like the elephant in the room or the ethereal elephant in the room. Ethereal Amulet is gone, as is the other sort of like hot pick, which was Doppelganger Cloak. Both of these things protected one of your Terrorgeists or your only Terrorgeist if you're running like a Dead Watch list or something like that. Or Death Watch, sorry. You don't have that anymore, so you're vulnerable more so than you used to be. Have you? I see. It's hard to understand when like we stopped going to tournaments, and again, you fortunate folk not in the USA whose countries handle this situation a little bit better got to go back to events and have fun again. We haven't, so we're all very, very upset. Did you get to experience like sort of pre have Ethereal Amulet and then post don't have Ethereal Amulet? Did you get to play those games?
I mean, I never really used the Ethereal Amulet
or Doppelganger's Cloak.
I was always Aether Quartz Brooch, but I did,
Nice.
I have played some games since we lost Aether Quartz Brooch, and you obviously feel the hit there on the just soaking up extra command points to everyone's dismay. That was a pretty big hit. So I completely get the hit that everybody who was running Doppelganger or running Ethereal Amulet or Gryffeather Charm or other fantastic, multiple artifacts in a realm artifacts.
Ignaxus.
I can totally feel that pain.
Yeah. I think that's. I mean, it's things. Your stuff dies a lot more now. So regen. The Chalice has probably never felt more valuable. The Endless Spell. So I guess what direction have you? So I think we covered traits pretty. Just the noteworthy what you're still looking to play with right now, sort of side of traits. What about artifacts? Like, what are you? So with this caveat that hey, some of these like awesome realm artifacts that were not a problem and only helped like sort of middle of the fat middle armies are now gone.
Yeah. I go back to stuff that I kind of fell on when this book first came out, just for, I don't know, maybe even just for laziness. Things that I took prior to this book that were in the GHB Legion's ability stuff for Flesheater, of course, when it was in the GHB. And I always kind of stumble back on Grim Garland. I really, really get a kick out of making things -2 bravery and then screaming at them with everything.
Yes.
It makes it so that those armies that you normally have to just like, oh well, I can't do anything, it's your bravery 10. Now you can actually do some damage. Death armies, all those chaos armies,
yep.
Well, the demon ones anyway. And Seraphon, who magically were bravery 10.
Right.
So you actually could do something, because before I used to, I literally take my players in the old book prior to their newer shooting rule, and it was just like, oh, you're higher than bravery 7 or higher than bravery 6, I can't touch you. Now it's a little bit different, but
yeah.
But that -2 meant that I could really do some damage, and for those armies that are already low bravery, it's devastating.
Right. No, I think Grim Garland is a really hot pick right now, because of that, like the bravery, the bravery scream. I think it's a really nice synergy. My pick, sort of as the standout from the Royal Treasury here, is actually the Dermal Robe. I've been a big. I was proponent of the dermal robe. You could probably ask G-Dead here. I gave him advice on this a little while ago, or he asked my opinion. I would say I gave him advice. Dermal robe is like the one I'm just like, take dermal robe, because with that like sort of arch regent, you can get you can get the +1 casting trait for it being your general or whatever, and you throw that dermal robe on it. And now you're looking at a +2 cast arch regent. That's real. That's a real caster now. And
don't and you don't want to ignore the unbind with that as well. I mean, +2 to unbind is huge too. That's where I struggle a lot. Is you have a caster that can easily cast spells that I normally can't roll for.
Right. and then G-Dead points out something we brought up on the LON episode, which is Corpse Cart as like one of the hidden gems of the LON book. Corpse Cart in a effect list. Now you're looking at a +3 to cast. I mean, that's a Nagash. You're a Nagash now. Like, cool. For 300 points and I'm casting like Nagash. Let's go. I mean, now you're approaching spell dom territory of I'm going to resolve my spells that I need to get off, and usually it's just you're throwing down a steroid buff and going, all right, sick 'em boy with a Terrorgeist. So. Or you're doing the mobility stuff because you had to deploy a little bit back, and now you need that extra mobility to get into threat range.
Right.
So, Corpse Cart plus Dermal Robe plus the caster trait for your general, and like now you're looking at something. So I really like the Dermal Robe. I'm not as confident in it now because you do have like these spell doms, and it's not making you dominant, it's making you compete at all, whereas before without it you just kind of don't wizards not something you do unless you have a +3. That is the ticket to ride. You must be at like a +2 or a +3 to cast, or don't even bother. So I guess that's maybe a little bit more of a sardonic way of looking at it, but I mean, I'm just saying don't count on spellcasting strategies if you don't have bonuses. There's something nice that you can do besides, but they're not something to bet on. This makes it more of a sure bet.
Right, and of course it's going to depend on who you're running as your general and things. I tend to favor my Kings on Terrorgeist for my generals, obviously within Gristlegore, but outside of that as well. But if you favor the Arch Regent, Grim Garland isn't going to get you very far. Right. Unless he's out and about doing some crazy things that no one ever does with an Arch Regent. So Journal Robe is a fantastic choice for him. Right. It's really almost the thing to take without any question whatsoever.
Right. And if you end up with that battalion, then you're taking both.
Yeah.
So, and there was a question earlier on, like, do you take realm artifacts? You mean a reroll 1 to do something? No. No.
They're just not
boring.
They're not great. They're I'm sure they have their use in general, but if you have a book with artifacts, pretty sure you can find something better. Mm-hmm. If you're running a Grand Alliance, maybe that's just enough for you. But I don't know. Don't know about that one.
Yeah.
Definitely not taking those minor things over, say, Grim Garland or Dermal Robe.
Yeah. I have seen some interesting lists where there are actually like very caster heavy lists, and they're taking deranged transformation, monstrous vigor, blood feast, like they're going all in. So I've seen some lists like that have been pretty interesting. But usually it's like you're looking to get your steroid off on your dragon, have it going and just like your move Yugi them. So yeah, I think the spells are the spells. I think most people are familiar with them. Anything to add regarding the spells? Anything that's really changed, or something that's like more valuable now than it was a year ago or so?
Probably not. I mean,
the spells are the spells.
Movement's great. Getting wounds back is great. I mean, you're going to see a lot more. Probably not even really a lot more. It's just that it'll be more relevant in those Blisterkin lists, the spectral hosts and things like that. Just that extra movement and everything. You're probably just going to feel the effects of it more. Not so much that it's any different or used any more than it was previously. Just
Right.
feel it more.
Right. And yeah, we already covered the mount traits, I think. So that's kind of like where they're sitting at with that. Trying to remember kind of my format from the LON episode to mirror it.
I mean, Legion of Nagash has a significantly wider spanning set of information. Flesheater Courts on the plus and minus is a very small and focused army.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So let's get to the hot take section. You have a particular unit. Speaking of, this is a thinner book than Legions of Nagash. There's a specific unit in this book. Now we talked a lot. You talk a lot about Terrorgeist, Archregents, even like Ghoul King on foot. Some of the Courtiers, which feel a little bit like attacks until you realize, okay, they've got a good buff. Like they're not too expensive. The game cares about having a hero nearby to stop people from doing stuff to certain objectives now. Like, so you don't feel too bad having to take that Courtier in your battalion anymore. Whereas before you felt like, this is pure attacks. Maybe you did, maybe you don't. So, like, whatever, the Courtiers are what they are. Sometimes you have to take them. A little, like, I call them 100-point idiots. You got to take your 100-point idiots sometimes. That's a deep cut for a Twitter discussion earlier this week. Like, idiot with the flag is what I've called the model that has the flag forever, and they just one of the rules they spoiled was, like, it's the idiot with a flag, and I'm just like, I thought it was just me. Okay, got to regen my stuff. And I'll grab the idiot with the flag, and I put the idiot with the flag back. Amazing. Sorry, tangent number 2. Take a drink. Maybe 3. Yeah. So ghouls are, to talk about ghouls. They look underwhelming on their stat sheet, and indeed they kind of are. They are a little maybe point for point overcosted until you realize that they're getting, I think they're kind of paying for the summoning. I wouldn't protest if ghouls went down to 90. I don't think anyone would. But 40 ghouls attacking twice and screaming across the table, like, don't underestimate it. Like, they can actually do some work. So I think ghouls are sort of a deceptively just solid unit. Flayers, I think we both love flayers, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I like
yes.
Double,
that's where it's at.
I like double activating fighting first flayers a lot. Like, they're really cool. They're super awesome. Like, 10 out of 10. Do recommend you get your bat fix and you run some flayers sometime just for kicks. So that brings us to another unit. Do you want to take the lead? This is
So, we chatted briefly beforehand. Crypt Horrors are this one unit that I was sitting here, I was digging through my books, and I'm like, I can't even remember why people liked them over Flayers before. Now, don't get me wrong, Flayers got a lot better, but they really weren't much different before. And the Crypt Horrors really haven't changed from what I can tell. So I honestly don't even know what the appeal was, other than maybe just cool factor or something. But yeah, I just don't take them. They're not bats, so I don't take them, right? They've got some strengths. They've got damage 2. They can go to damage 3. They're healing wounds. You can reroll hits. They're definitely not bad, but I'm not going to take them for my own just personal, not related to competitive reason.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't even know why they were the go-to before. Players are just cooler. You can fly. You can do damage. You can scream at things. Like, it's pretty fun.
They are as
I like being able to scream at things.
Yeah, they are, as previously mentioned, bats.
Yes.
I mean, they've also got the rend as well. Their damage too. Like, they can scream at stuff. Like, I don't know. Like, I like flayers. Or no, they're not damage 2. They're damage. They're damage 1. They're damage 1.
They have the rend, whereas the Crypt Horrors don't have the rend.
Yeah, and then they can they can mortal wound you, right? In addition,
they can.
Yeah.
They can.
So
it didn't used to be an addition, and it used to be
instead.
I think it just stopped, but now it's an addition, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so they can scream at you and they can do some damage. And so that screaming gives you synergy if you are on the Grim Garland. If you've got the Grim Garland around, right? So, yeah, I like Flayers. I don't know that... I mean, it's not a one-to-one comparison because they're different roles. I mean,
Yeah.
comparing something that flies and has, like, this sort of, like, fast cavalry sort of, like, role to something that doesn't. But I don't know. Crypt Horrors are... You know, they're there. Anyone in chat... The rerolls. Is it really? It just comes down to the rerolls?
I mean, it very well could be. I mean, it's a thing, you know. It's useful. I know most people kind of switched over to players. You know, from book to book, I'd say that the players improved significantly compared to the horrors, which looked like they didn't change their war scroll whatsoever, and didn't even change points initially, from what I can tell. You know, players that scream got better. You know, that's fantastic. Being the 6 is the hit. Doing a mortal wound in addition is obviously a big increase there. But you know, if you like the horrors, take the horrors. They're a good time, right?
Yeah. It's funny. I just thought it was interesting. So in the comments below this video, if you're watching the VOD, feel free to explain to me why horrors are great. Please go full propaganda if you wish.
Yes, refresh my memory on why they were the thing.
So I mean, and then that's pretty much that's the book. I mean, that's really it. It's a very focused sort of I'd say refined a book. Also, Flayers are in 2 battalions. See, you're supposed to be. Horrors are in all but 2 battalions. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
they
there
are
you go.
Available in multiple battalions.
Yeah, you could you can take a unit you don't want in a bunch of battalions. Oh, Morghast, the most gassed. What about Morghast? You said you had a hot take about Morghast. Talk about the cruise missiles. Oh, like you just want to bring in a Morghast and like shoot it at a thing? Yeah, I mean, cool. I mean, they're sweet models. Don't get me wrong. I think they're really awesome. It's just they're in that weird space of, like I don't know if they were intended to actually be in the game for really real. Like I don't know. It's weird. They're cool. They're really cool. And I remember seeing the conversion of the person doing like the sort of like the Circus Macabre sort of thing for his whole army, and he had these like really sweet looking Morghasts with like the surgeon masks, and I'm like, ooh, like the Plague Doctor mask. I'm like, these things are awesome. And then I looked at the rules. I'm like, aw. Unfortunately,
I know one person who will always take them no matter what. So.
Oh wait, why are you?
You know that person as well.
I'm sorry. No, G-Dead. I'm crossed my. I thought you were talking about the blood dudes that come out the bodies. Oh my gosh, I crossed my circuits. No, Morghasts are awesome. What are you talking about? Why are you bringing up Morghasts during the Flesheater Courts episode? I'm gonna edit that in post because I just sounded like a total idiot there. I'm just like, Morghasts. I'm like thinking about them. Morghasts are awesome. They're actually really cool in Legions of Nagash right now. And Ossiarch Bone Reapers, it's kind of a high tax because you're putting a lot of points into 2 models and you desperately want models. But in Legions of Nagash, Morghasts are great. You can just have 100 bodies and then Morghasts anyway. You can take Morghasts in Flesheater Courts. I mean, as allies, right?
No. Remember. I don't think you can.
Deadwalkers, Deathlords, Death Mages.
Deadwalkers, Deathlords, Death Mages, and I don't think they're Deathlords, unfortunately. I could be wrong.
Why are you... Man! G-Dead, you're fired. I'm kidding, man. They are cool allies for FEC because they are Deathlords, right? You should have the Deathlord keyword.
They are Deathlords? Interesting. I'm sure I've looked at that a million times.
Yeah, Death Lords. Yeah, they're Death
Nice.
Lords, so you can take Morghasts. Morghasts in Flesheater Courts. Okay, let me reset. We'll edit out that whole last about 20 minutes. Morghasts in Flesheater Courts. See, you can afford bodies pretty handily. In terms of, like, I mean, you're going to have a good amount of ghouls because the summoning is going to compensate. So the downside of Morghasts, where they're essentially, like, just a huge, like, body tax, is compensated for. So, like, that's a plus for Morghast run in Flesh Eater Courts over, say, Ossiarch Bone Reapers. From there, you're talking about Ren 2 Blunders. They deal the damage. They are cruise missiles. They're not coming back from that mission, though. We talked about some tricks that you can do in LON to kind of protect your Morghasts with Legions of Night, so that they have a hero nearby to give them that death save. In Flesh Eater Courts, they don't have that. They're just going to explode. Like, they're stupid fast. And 3d6 charges are, like, actually, like, I mean, that's why you're taking them. It's the 3d6 charge. But you can't really do the tricks. You don't have access to the tricks that make them worthy. You don't have Relentless Discipline from Ossiarch Bone Reapers to, like, make them do some, to project their own death save and do some other stuff. And you don't have the Legions of Night tricks from Legions of Nagash. I think they're a trap. Their FEC's ranged attacks. No, your ranged attack is a Terrorgeist or flares.
I'm not opposed to this notion. He mentioned the spectral host and just kind of like really going for it with the movement there. But I mean, they'd be acting independently, which is totally fine.
I mean, that's why we call them missiles. They're not coming back from that mission. I mean, it really, I'd have to play it. I mean, this is one of those things I have to play it. I'm skeptical because, again, like, you're not compensating for some of those weaknesses. You're only compensating for one of the weaknesses, which is the body tax with Flesh Eater Courts. So you spectral host, you throw them in, no, they're not coming back, but then they have to be really punching above their weight class at 190 points. So they have to get you that return on that investment pretty handily. So I guess it depends on what you're firing them at, because they're probably not coming back. If you're throwing them at that one protected objective over there, you have stuff to deal with that, So, yeah, I mean, you can do it, but I don't know. Like, I like the corpse cart better if we're talking like the best allies for Flesh Eater Courts. Like, it's a low investment. It does a thing, and your opponent might get, like, overzealous and try to shoot it instead of something important. So, yeah, I don't know. You said Morghasts. What the hell was that? Mournghul? Was Mournghul what I was thinking of? I was thinking of Mournghul's, wasn't it? I'm just like, why are you talking about? I think I was thinking of Mournghul. Let me pull up my thing here. It was Mournghul's. I was thinking of Mournghul's. Okay, I am so smart.
Very different.
Mm-hmm. Flares are 170. These guys hit way harder. I mean, unless you're bringing flares in the battalion. Yeah. I mean, they are blunders. It's true. I won't. I'm not disagreeing with you, Kyle, that Morghasts are sweet. I'd have to play them. No.
The area where I think they might fade a little bit in my mind is just like, I spend a lot of time bringing back flayers with Vargalts, with Crypt Infernal Couriers that I would not be able to do with the Morghasts.
Yeah,
Not that
and
that's a selling point for anybody, but that's just my personal.
yeah, you can bring the flayers back, and also they're usually free. You're summoning them. You know, like that's something like you summon in your 3-pack of flayers to go do their job. Um, like, I mean that. Yeah, yeah. They just don't have any synergies with it.
Right.
Like, I mean that's the thing. Both are net 12 wounds, but flayers, like Tanya said, are just potentially unlimited. Yeah.
I mean, two versus three. You know, you're probably on pretty even ground there. When you start talking about maybe say four, which I don't even, I guess you could technically afford it, versus six, I would completely say it's probably not worth it at that point.
But that's such a points investment.
It is. It's a lot of points.
No, I don't know. I derailed myself by thinking you meant Mournghul for a long time, and I was like, yeah, it is a sweet model. And then, oh man, it's been a long week. I'm sorry, everybody. That was my mistake. I'll get better for you. And then the other thing is, I wanted to talk about is just like touch on Chalice real quick. Chalice is Usheran is just like awesome, sort of. It's just awesome. It's got a pretty amazing range. It's a low cast value at 6, and it's doing that other thing, which is regenning you.
Yeah, it's super fantastic with that 40-man unit of ghouls or even that 20-man unit of ghouls. I honestly haven't really used it outside of Ghoul Patrol list, but it's strong regardless. You know, making those ghouls pretty much just keep standing back up and keep hanging out by that key objective. You know, and just continue to outnumber your foe.
Yeah,
You know, you slap the Archregent stuff on them, and they get, you know, hopefully plus 3 attacks, but you know, anywhere from 1 to 3, and it's just a blender.
Yeah. Now I'm sad I didn't paint my cup gold. Like, you got to paint it gold with purple drink in it, okay? Everyone knows this. Like, this is the one exception to painting blood. You paint the purple drink, because that's what they're imagining it is it's purple drink, because they are classy folk, okay? The pimp cup of doom. Yeah, unfortunately, Necromancer doesn't really do much. There's no summonable keyword on, like, stuff, so you're not...
Yeah,
you can't Van
used
Hell's...
to be able to do it way long ago, but not anymore.
Yeah, like, it doesn't really do much for you. I guess if you're thinking of, like, some people bring in like a zombie ally, and then I believe they have summonable, and no. Zombies might have summonable, maybe that's what you're doing, like, I don't know. Zombies are actually really cool in LON. I haven't parsed the numbers in Flesheater Course, because I do think Flesheater Course, for the most part, is a self-contained book. It really has its tools in it. That's part of the beauty of it. Sometimes going outside of your book is more cute than good. The exception here is you usually have something in your army that does the job you're trying to reach out of your tome to do, and it does it as good as, or a little bit worse, but has extra synergies to make it better. And that's really like what Flesheater Courts is doing. That's what most Death is doing. Is it's that intricate house of cards that are all like sort of built in theme with each other. Once you start talking like, you know, I didn't really touch on Grand Alliance Death too much, but maybe that's what we're talking about next week with Sean. Who knows? The only one, the exception is that corpse cart, because it gives you a bonus to casting, which is something you just kind of need. Relatively low points cost investment with about 100 points, which again you can hammer. You can make up 100 points in a Flesheater Courts list with your summoning, or by buying a tenor of ghouls instead of something more substantive. I mean, I look at it like that. That's how I look at it. I like being cute a lot with my lists. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes you're being like, it's you gotta like, oh, this is awesome. Yes, it is an awesome thing, but like it's a cute awesome thing. It's not, and you're allowed to do it because have fun with anything you want to. I mean, if you have the potential. But, I mean, Morghasts are creeping on finally viable in the armies that they aren't allied into. I don't think that makes them hyper viable in an army they're an ally into, if that makes sense. This is not a prime time going into Seraphon here. Like, this is a like way more metal Flayer, but you have Flayers already, and Flayers are bats, as we mentioned previously, and bats are sweet.
Yes, therefore better.
For the purposes of this propaganda. We'll get to the part where I talk about how sweet bones are later.
All right.
Yeah. So I mean Chalice is still very viable. It works on Flayers. It works on your 3-wound stuff. So it's really good. I mean, you're throwing it down on an objective, and you're just saying no, you move. You know, stuff like that. Or you're going on an aggressive onslaught because it's got a great range, wholly within 24 plus its initial cast. You can really throw that thing out there, and you're saying, hey, we're grinding now. So you can really like you can even use it like aggressively, which is something I think people need to get a little bit more in the habit of doing. Is being the aggressor, like on objectives, and like don't just think of it as a castle piece. Think of it as an aggressive piece, as saying this onslaught will continue. You are World War Z now, where like the corpses just smash into the wall and like they start crawling on top of each other. That's what you're doing when you throw a Chalice forward.
And I caught an interesting conversation the other day, and it's true in my experience. People just don't unbind, they don't dispel that spell. It sits out there, and it's a low 6 spell. I mean, if you've got more than one caster and you're not committed to a very specific offensive or a buff spell for yourself, you should try to get rid of that.
Well, and that's the thing is like
don't tell anyone.
Well, I mean, I'm fine if they try to get rid of it, because I mean, it'll be turned off for a turn, and then I'm going to bring it back. And I'm glad you didn't spend that spell on something useful, potentially. So it's like you're just, like, I really want it out there, but I mean, if you're now you're not casting one of your buff spells or debuff spells, like you're not casting that sort of third spell essentially for the average list, or fourth spell for the average list, which is usually where you're getting into their like sort of second tier utility. Like, cool, I'll take that trade. Like trading utility for utility, and I'm bringing mine back, and hopefully with my other stuff, I'm able to push the advantage in that turn anyway. So I understand not being a big fan of Flayers. So it sounds to me like you're just trying to get an alternate to Flayers, and if that's the intent with Morghasts in, like, go ahead, go to town.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, the comparable costs, like I said, the cost and the body stuff is really easily compensated by Flesheater Courts. I think it's a little bit of a non-bow, but not so much so that you shouldn't do it if you like it. Yeah. I like Flayers. Mine are all painted like Golbat. Nice.
Nice.
All right. So I think, I mean, any sort of like any sort of like summarizing thoughts on Flesheater Courts, anything you want to talk about the army, personal tangents. Chat gang, you got any questions here before we wrap up? Questions or hot takes?
So, I mean, Flesheater Courts, I think they're still a nice, strong, comfortable list, and comfortable army. People are gravitating towards the shootier list or some of the newer stuff that's come out. Obviously, and it's going to have some strengths, and most things have a lot more options than Flesheater Courts. Except maybe some of the newer elf armies. So I don't feel like a lot needs to change. I know a friend of mine was talking about, a lot of people being interested in seeing maybe a new kit when this comes around again, because it is on the limited side. I don't know if we need it or not. I'm not opposed to it. I am really gonna miss Aether Force Roach, though. Let me tell you, it's gonna be a hard one to play without. I was fortunate enough to attend an event where everyone did a pretty good job of trying to uh, stay up on COVID things, distancing, hand washing, sanitizing, mask wearing, etc. And I did bring a Flesheater Quartz army to that. It was kind of a revamp of a Blisterkin list that I guess probably stole um, from Jeremy up in Michigan. Um, Flare heavy, Dead Watch, a lot of fun. I was a bit rusty with it, did not perform well, but it took us some getting used to not having Aether Quartz Roach.
Hmm.
Instead, putting in Grim Garland. Again, I still love that artifact. Have a lot of fun with it. Um, it's going to take some adjustments, and maybe Blisterkin does shine more than Gristle War now with some of those changes. I haven't really put enough thought into um, where to take my traditional list from here. Um, but it's been fun this entire time. I've had fun playing, those Terrorgeists, those Slayers back before Gristle War existed, back before anyone wanted to give them much of a chance.
Hmm.
And it was fantastic to get a book that just fell right in line with the lists I was already playing. Um, it was a welcome change of pace from what I'm used to.
Right.
So I was the bad guy for a little bit. Usually I'm that person playing the soft and fluffy things that are pretty laughable. And then all of a sudden I was playing the thing that was the best thing. Uh, Very odd for me.
No, it is weird when like the meta rotates and you find yourself like on the top, and like having to adjust to like being the bad guy suddenly, especially with like something as contentious as Gristlegore was. I mean, you're one of those opponents that's like always they're just people that's just always a delight to run into at a tournament. I actually just now noticed that not only are you rocking a bat necklace, but you're also wearing the heavy
Yes.
pants. The heavy
My
pants
heavy
shirt,
pants.
which was our club the one
With my
time at
mis-
yeah.
with my misspelling on it.
Yeah, that makes it better. I've got mine. It's
No,
actually
God.
it's actually like folded carefully, and it's
Nice.
been kept separate from my clothes because I intended to put it in like a little like glass case or like a shadow box, and then like break in case of
Nice.
emergency and like have to go back to Midwest Meltdown or something in the same team. But yeah, so yeah, I like just kind of I'm gonna rehash it here, but I think Flesheater Quartz is still a competent army. I like to think of things in terms of like competent and is like sort of a tier of like worthy competition, right? Like worthy competitive. It's not S tier anymore.
Yeah.
It is not busted tier. It is not the
Yeah.
unfair zone. Most of the things that it does have some tricks. It really does. Like the death from the skies. Your summoning, being able to outflank. If you go with your battalions usually come with some tricks for like Dead Watch and has some tricks in terms of combat. And then Ghoul Patrol
Yeah.
has some ambushing tricks which are really really handy. So you actually have more tricks than I think people realize Flesheater Quartz has available. In a couple of these ways because they got so used to just seeing, okay, Gristlegore is going to kill stuff.
Right.
Like they just got so used to it, and I think that you can use that to your advantage right now with like Blister. I think that's what Blister skin's really doing is the teleport. Like suddenly you just like teleport the zombie. You deploy the zombie dragon or Terrorgeist in the corner of the table, teleport it, and just go like, "What's up?" Like so. There's still there's some cool tricks in there that people aren't. They're not as aware of because that thing happens when something gets a nerf. It doesn't matter if it like truly ruins the army or makes it suddenly bad. Just the perception of it getting worse is often enough to move people who aren't now fans of the army off of that army and onto something new. I mean, I look at this game and like people who are even like loyalists to like an army. I mean, will still play the new thing or something will catch their eye because like, okay, I've got this army figured out, now I want to play the next army, or I have hobby ambitions here. And so people like have this, I call it the recency bias of Age of Sigmar, where we tend to like just, okay, the new something shiny, something new comes out. And so you couple a nerf with something new, and like people move off of it, and now we're not paying attention to Flesheater courts, and that's the sweet spot for me. Is you've got a little bit of you've got a little bit of snowflake power now. People don't fully expect you, like, and they didn't fully learn how to play against you before, which is something utterly unique to your army, to the Flesheater courts army. They didn't really learn how to play around Gristlegore. They just waited for it to go away. So they never had to face your other tricks. And that is a huge advantage. You haven't shown, like, this tome hasn't really shown all of its cards. Which I think is one of the things that makes Flesheater Courts such a special army within the scope of death.
I've been hearing some great talk about even is it Hollowmorn and Morghasts? The other two grand courts that generally aren't taken. I think people are starting to play around with them. It's a really good time and opportunity to really explore those areas that were just kind of overlooked. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I'm seeing some questions in chat here about the other endless spells. I haven't used the Barricade or the Stampede from Flesheater Courts, but I was checking back through them today. The Barricade's got its kind of blocking, helpful purposes. It can slow down some movement. Not bad.
Yeah.
The Stampede, it's significantly bigger than you think it would be just from a picture of it. So anyone who's got it or painted it or played against it can probably attest to it. It's a pretty big spell. So although it's not going to do a crazy amount of damage to your opponent, it is predatory and can move it around, and your opponent can move it if you go first and stuff like that. It still takes up a good amount of space, and I think you can never discount how much space some of those spells take up, since they can hinder movement as you have to go around them and not over them. You place them close to objectives or near a unit that you need to protect. There's lots of different opportunities there. So you can never really discount those. I just think that they haven't really shown, in comparison to the Chalice, their points aren't necessarily
competitive.
Something where you feel like you wanted to sink the points there. You can get some different opportunities from similar spells, either from the general like malign sorcery list of spells.
Right. There's usually a malign sorcery stand-in or proxy for this. I think what it ends up being is like these other endless spells, like your Chalice is part of like sort of the I don't say the build, like, but the bone, like the sort of like structure. It's the blueprint. It's already in the blueprint usually for most of your builds. It's like, okay, Chalice, yes, no, and you just kind of check, am I going to take it this time, yes or no? The other ones are like, they're not necessarily in that sort of core blueprint of what a list looks like. And then by the time you get to, okay, I've got some extra points, am I going to, take it or not? Like, you're usually looking elsewhere for that corpse cart. You're looking elsewhere for like a cheeky ally, or just I need another tenor of ghouls, or because I feel a little light now. I think you're probably always buying the command point, so I'd almost even like kind of check that box as just you're always buying the extra command point as Flesheater Courts. You're conceivably always buying one of the battalions, and then it's a coin flip on whether you're bringing Chalice or not. And so you have these sort of like, I'd say you should always be bringing a Terrorgeist. So like those are just like costs that are in that list. Like if you're not bringing a Terrorgeist, I would hear arguments for like, oh, I'm just going to go max body spam, so on and so forth. I would hear arguments for it. I 100% would. But like, if you're not playing a Terrorgeist in Flesheater Courts, what are you even doing here? Like, I mean,
and you know what? You could probably make that argument in the old book, but I'm with you in the new book. If you're not bringing a Terrorgeist, you don't belong here. Maybe I don't know what's the right way to put it, but
no, I would never exclude someone based on their interests. But for the sake of hyperbole and joke, yeah, like why? No, sincerely, why are you here? What brought you here if it wasn't to play with huge, sweet dragons and or bats?
Sure.
Leave a comment below.
Right, bats is the right answer.
Yeah,
bats is the right answer.
Yeah, I say Terrorgeist, but I use it interchangeably with Zombie Dragon. Zombie Dragon is a little bit more expensive and therefore feels not as good because the Terrorgeist with the essentially the crit efficient, pardon me, just does work. But the rend is very comparable if you're picking up the enhanced rend, and the sort of like I think they're both spellcasters, but the zombie dragon's got like a cooler, like got a pretty cool spell. Like, so you've got,
He's got a different spell. Yeah.
yeah, you've got some. There are reasons to think about taking a zombie dragon in addition to a Terrorgeist, is what I'm saying. Is like, so sometimes you take two Terrorgeists, and sometimes you take one Terrorgeist and one zombie dragon.
And they really can work well together.
Unless
you know, just bringing those two different elements to the table. Like the problem you run into when you start getting redundant models, especially with casters who don't have a lot of spells. It's less true now than it was before. But you know, you'd have a Terrorgeist, looking on Terrorgeist, and you have two of them. You have one spell, and before this book, that was your one spell, and you couldn't cast it more than once in a turn. So
yeah.
Then you were, you know, Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield. You know, with the realms, you had access to other things, and I will miss the spells from the realms. That list I showed earlier, pre the current Flesheater Court book, where I ended up having 6 casters on the table with 2 unique spells between the 6 of them. Mm-hmm. Really relied on those realm spells for just being able to cast anything. You know, and there were certain realms I didn't get much use out of, but it was still better than having no option at all.
Right. I think with this sort of zombie dragon Terrorgeist, I see chat's kind of latched onto this idea and talking about the unique spells and stuff. The breath attack for the zombie dragon also something to champion. You know, decent thing. Yeah, I mean, because it just works, right? Like that's for the most part, it just kind of works. I'm with you, Kicker. I don't think it's a right or wrong thing, but I do favor one Terrorgeist, one zombie dragon personally. I do also really think that the null deployment list has legs, and in that case, you're taking 2 zombie dragons. So like null deploying your zombie dragons like in the sky, and then like your ghouls off the table. Like that's, I mean, that I really enjoy that concept. I mean, I've basically been doing a way worse version of that with Beasts of Chaos for a while. I'm like, yo, this army is meant to do this. Like, yeah, like what's better than outflank? Oh yeah, having like a dedicated pair of deep strikes on like awesome monsters. Like, let's go. And then now against shooting, I mean, that's your best defense. Dragon in the sky, you can't shoot it now. So
that's true.
So I like that. True. And I mean, you add in like, okay, so maybe you're not doing 2 dragons both in the sky because you want that spicy bite attack, right? On the Terrorgeist. So now your blister skin, you deploy it in the corner, teleport it with the blister skin ability. You've got the zombie dragon in the sky. Like now you're cooking with gas. Like you can just suddenly go from like, you know, like, okay, got my basic deployment on my you know, on my objectives on the home base, so, you know, got all my stuff set up. You know, your first deployment is going to be zombie dragon in the sky. Give them no information. You're going to put a Terrorgeist in the flippin' corner at the like somewhere midway through your deployment once you've set up the stuff and given them this little information. And now that blister skin teleport, and you're just like, woo, like here we go, like let's fight. So I like that. I personally, again, this goes to that, like there are hidden tactics in this book that I don't think people really had gleaned yet, and that's where you're at. For instance, my list was like that I was thinking about building and running and stuff. Kind of, I asked myself the question: if I built a list right now for this meta, what would that look like? Once I got rid of my Timmy urge to run Dead Watch, like. Once I got rid of my urge to just run Dead Watch and call it a day, it was essentially it was a zombie dragon, a Terrorgeist. I think it was either a 40 block or 30 block of ghouls. I might have trimmed it down to a 30 to afford the chalice, the extra command point, an arch regent, possibly a second one, and then like one of the battalions. I think it was a ghoul patrol or something like that. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much the list. And I'm like, I look at that and I go, all right, like. Let's play games. Make a blister skin if you want the teleport tricks and the extra speed, which is super appealing. or I feast day because I love command points. But so that's just like I mean, and I think that's a competent 3-2 list. Run hot or get lucky, you're looking at a 4-1. And I'd feel comfortable walking away from a tournament with that showing.
And that style list is what I was seeing, and I think it's pretty similar to what I was playing at Dragonfall last year, which I borrowed the meat of that list from Sean from Nuke Doctor, out in the Detroit area, and I think Brendan was running something similar to that at one point.
Yeah.
It's a solid build with the Ghoul Patrol. I think most of us were running it with Crystal Gore just to make the monsters extra hitty. But I'm sure you could play around with it in Blisterkin and have a good time.
Yeah. We already kind of tackled the which one should I run. I think I feel confident with maybe one's better for the current meta, but they all bring something to the table that is desirable depending on your playstyle. And I would rather you play confidently with something that is your playstyle than play sort of wishy-washy or uncertain with that isn't your playstyle. If you're not that KG objective player, that's really trying to make chess moves with a teleport and super speed zombies, then maybe you do want that the turbo uppercut, right? That is the Gristle Gore.
Yeah, I'm terrible. I'm a terrible person. I'm definitely a run forward and hit things in the face kind of person, and it takes me a while to break that habit and try to actually play things to their strengths and actually make good decisions about.
You have a bad.
Gristle and I are we're good friends.
You're good friends. I mean, Gristle Gore remains it's got the parachutes, to get my value back out of my dragon if I overcommit. So it's still got that sort of golden parachutes style ripcord just see ya. But you downplay it. You've won a lot of you've got a wall of trophies with this army, as Christian Ware put it. A best death amongst them. Again, you're one of those opponents that not just opponents, just people I see at a tournament. I'm just hell yeah, Tanya. I go out of my way to talk to you every time for the most part, and I will miss Haywo if it weren't for the fact that we drove down together at some of these events. So. I wouldn't take anything away from it. You put in the time on this army across a pair of editions, and I would even say kind of pseudo 3 editions, with the Dark Ages, right when points dropped,
Yeah.
That was almost its own sort of beta test of what Age of Sigmar would look like. So I mean, you put in the time, you've got the games, and yeah, I mean, there's no harm in playing the way you want to play, yeah. So thanks for coming on. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's been great to chat about Flesheater Courts and make my brain start thinking about Warhammer again.
Yeah.
Hanging out at home most of the time, not being able to do the slew of tournaments that I had lined up for the year. Really put a damper on some hobby mojo, and absolutely put a damper on any list writing mojo. So it's nice
No, I'm
to,
there with you.
to
I'm there with
refresh
you.
and chat and hear some chat gang reason and rationale about why I should be taking Morghasts, even though I probably never will.
Take the most gas. Yeah.
Kyle would agree.
If you run Death Watch, the Stampede is cute because it's hard to damage you. Yeah, can be. Cool King, yeah. And I just kind of catching up on chat here. Yeah, there's a lot of theory craft going right now. Most people who are getting in games, it's usually very, very smaller scale events or personal reps, and there's nothing wrong with that or TTS in terms of our area, our region. Get the games and get the joy where you can. I like having an excuse to talk about Age of Sigmar every week because it's something I truly love, and I am feeling the lack of events as well. It's hit my hobby mojo too. I would theoretically be painting Catacross right now if I maintained my schedule. And, like, I will have been playing Nagash anyway, despite the Petrifex nerf elite, the Petrifex elite nerf. And I would just be like,
Always,
yeah, and
always be on brand.
I would still be having a blast, you know, and you know, that first event after the nerf I would have felt like kind of grumpy maybe, but it takes me casting Hand of Dust once or like mini gunning a bunch of Mystic Bolts and I'd be like right back in it. I'm just like, yeah, this is why I play this dude, like, but like, you know, I had my eyes on the, you know, getting Catacross painted gradually so that it like looks great, and I haven't touched any of my hobby stuff. I was gonna make a display board this year, and some of it's become too easy of an excuse, and so my sort of life moment for myself is trying to not use it as an excuse anymore and just find the motivation, the spark where I can. So it's become way too easy an excuse to blame COVID for things, and it's like, yes, that's a reality of things that are going on, but also you know, sometimes you have to spit in the face of God and you know, dare him to throw a lightning bolt at you, or you know, a disease, and like just paint instead of, you know, daring a lightning bolt. So I guess it's really not like that at all. That metaphor has run away, but but yeah, I mean, just I don't know. I need to stop using that all too easy excuse and just start loving death again. You know, loving life and loving death armies. Yeah. So, yeah. Again, thank you for being on. Anything you want to shout out while you're here? Anything you want to put on blast?
Oh, it was really nice to be on. I recognize that I'm not the strongest player of any army. You know, there's some great Flesheater Courts players out there that can totally run you down all the competitive everything. You know, but it was fantastic to just be able to chat about this army that I've been having a lot of fun with, really, since Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
Since it kind of kicked off.
Well, I think it's important to represent stuff from a broad spectrum of opinion. So thank you again for being on. Dead Montana there, burning 1,000 RDP to remind everyone that Chat Gang ain't nothing to mess with. I am, of course, the Magical Mr. Mephisto. This has been the Dark Elf Sorceress Tanya, talking about Flesheater Courts. This is Mephisto's Merry Month of Death. So next week, it's the Mystery Death Army. Do I have the hot inside scoop about vampirates? Am I just going to talk about the low-hanging fruit that is Grand Alliance Death? I don't know.
It's just going to be it's just going to be a rantcast about Nagash.
It's just
Nagash.
Yeah, just 3 hours of talking about Nagash. Is it Tomb Kings? Am I representing our much maligned like sort of like you know, older, like our older sibling that's sort of like moved out the house and already like went to college, and you know, like we kind of forgot that they're just like out there living life. Maybe it's living unlife. Maybe it's Tomb Kings. I think that's what I put it down in the schedule on. But you'll just have to tune in next week to find out. So,
awesome.
So it's never Tomb Kings. So, Chat Gang, thank you for joining us tonight. You are the show within the show. You're the reason we do this thing. Remember to drink your milk, pay your taxes, and I will see you very soon because I got Mephtober to continue after this. So, speaking of death, Dead Space. Elf Joe saying thank you. All right, good night, everybody. Yeah, Mass Effect. You will not bait me, G-Dad. You will not bait me. Good night, everybody. Good night, Tanya.
Bye.